Hello, hello, and welcome to Old Women Who Write. As usual, I get so excited when I have a guest. And every time it's because I've read one or more of their books, and I'm excited about their books, or excited if they happen to be agents or publishers about what they do. And today I bring to you Ash Braley, but I have to tell you that the secret is we're neighbors. We live in the same tiny house village in the mountains of Western North Carolina, almost in the mountains. Um, and so we have been neighbors for several years now. And Ash has been a musician, software engineer, photographer, videographer, and now she is a novelist. So we're going to talk about the adventure of writing a novel when you're not 20, and why she wrote it and what she wrote. So welcome, Ash.
Thank you.
Yeah,
My pleasure.
glad you're here. So this is a first novel. I always love to interview first book people. What made you write? Forget the genre, forget everything. What was it that wanted in you that wanted to write?
It's interesting. I wanted to be a writer before I really knew what that meant. I could trace it back to maybe junior high school. I always wanted to write. I've had several careers, as I mentioned, but that dream was always there. I remember as a college student, I had an old portable typewriter that I always had because someday I was going to be a writer. Of course, that didn't happen, but after I retired, I had a little more time to think about it. I began to write short stories. And I started a few novels. I started 3, 4 novels, got up to
Mhm.
about page 50, and it just stopped. The process stopped. But this time it was different. I was sitting here at my desk on November 1st, this past November, and I noticed that it was the first day of National Novel Writing Month. And I had been sort of looking for a project to do. And I thought, okay, starts today. I'm going to start writing a novel. And I opened the laptop and I had no idea what the novel was going to be, what it was going to be about. I have, of course, notebooks full of ideas, but I thought, this is it. I'm going to go for it. There's no harm in failing at this. There's absolutely no downside to just trying it. Um, in fact, one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten about writing is don't be afraid to fail,
Uh-huh.
because if you're afraid to fail you will never start. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to go for it. And I had some ideas, as I said, an idea of a story, and I just began to create the characters, create the scene where the action was going to be, and I dropped my characters into situations and let them talk to each other and listen to them, and just began to write what happened. And it took a while. It took about 2 weeks of going through that process, and it began to gel into more of a story. And at that point, I scrapped the whole thing and just started over. Started with chapter one
Oh my
and
God.
wrote my way through it.
Well, first of all,
Yeah,
let
so
me
that
say
took
I'm
another couple of
stunned.
weeks.
You're saying the idea between first, I'm going to do this thing, and now is November, December, January, February, 4 months, and you have the book out. You know,
Yes,
I am blown
yes, it's
away.
right here.
An older kind of justice.
It was ready. It was ready to happen. That's really why
Thank
I was able to do it. It was just time, and something up here or in here was ready to start the process.
you. Yes.
And I guess it was a little hard to get started, even though I really wanted to. But I had to just let the process take over and just really drop any thought of people are going to read this and maybe they won't like it,
Yeah.
or maybe it won't be good enough, because all of that is beside the point for me. I wasn't writing it so that people would read it. I was writing it because it wanted to be written, and it was something my heart wanted to do. um, that was always the motivation to do it. I published it later because, well, it wasn't that much later, because I let a few friends read it and they were, let's just say, very encouraging. The story is so good. I read it in one sitting. The first two people said they read it in one sitting because they just needed to know what happened. So I thought, well, maybe I could turn it into a manuscript, and why not publish it?
It's fabulous. You know, we'll talk about the genre you write in a minute, but I want to say as a nonfiction writer, I mean, I'm a memoir writer, who
Hmm.
is scared to death of fiction, just petrified about fiction. And when I hear someone say, and then the character spoke to me, my insides are screaming, how does that happen? How does that happen? Right? Because I have not experienced, I don't have an answer. That's just, something that goes on in my head all the time. I don't know.
Yeah. One thing that really helped me was I started with the characters, and this is a little tip. I searched on the web for images of people who fit the basic demographic of the character I was going to be writing for. And I got some pictures, and I actually printed them out and I put them on the board above my desk, and look at them and get into their head. What would a person who looks like this, how would they talk? What would they care about? What kind of music would they listen to? You know, are they a night owl? Do they get up early? What kind of work do they do? And just let the process of imagination take over. And it's interesting you say that you write nonfiction without fear, because for me, it's easier to write fiction because there's no expectation about whether or not it's true. If it's fiction, you're making it up. It doesn't have to be true, right?
Right. And so, an older kind of justice. No,
Yes. An older kind of
older
justice.
kind of justice. I love the title. I had to think about it even after I finished the book, why that was the title. But it is a mystery. And I've been a mystery reader since I was probably 8 years old. I've read every series. I know when mystery readers, at least in the past, talk to each other, they don't talk about book titles, they talk about book series. Have you
Mm-hmm.
read blah, 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 his, hers, whatever? Um, that's what we do. So I was particularly interested that you had written a mystery. Why did you choose that genre?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I actually did not sit down to write a mystery. I sat down to tell a story. And it's something about the publishing world, the book selling world, that you have to have a category and you have to label your book as being in a certain category. And I was a little uncomfortable with that because a lot of mysteries are very formulaic. And I
Mhm.
was dead set that I was not going to follow a formula with this book. I
Yes.
was going to let the story tell itself. But you have to pick something. You have to, and it seemed to be more of a mystery than, I don't know, science fiction. I had to pick something. It wasn't historical fiction. I had to pick something, and it probably qualifies for most readers as a mystery.
Yeah, I think so. And I will tell the listeners that it's set surprisingly in a North Carolina tiny house village,
Houseville.
um, but that at the moment at least has no comparison in terms of what the village is to your book. Um, um, but I was thinking, I mentioned to you when I was inviting you to be on the show that the original creator of the village where we both now live, um, its original name was the Village of Wildflowers, and the creator of the village had a vision. I talked to him about this a number of times, and his vision um, was that it be a place just for people to live and enjoy being with each other and follow whatever their own passions are. And he wanted lots of music, lots of light, lots of art, and that's where he was about it. So I thought about that when I was reading your book, that, had the original developer not sort of been dependent on his own pocket to develop this, um, and had he been younger, probably because he was close to 90 when he was doing this.
Good
Um,
heavens.
yeah,
Yeah.
it could have maybe been exactly the kind of village you describe in your book. So that,
Yeah, perhaps. That's interesting because I had not known anything about
yes.
the original vision for this village. But I actually would like to just quickly read the passage where we
Oh,
talk
that's great.
about,
I was going to ask you about reading. Good.
yes, the founder of this, my fictional tiny house village, is a man named Johnny. And he's talking with some of the other residents of the village, a new resident, and he says, they say that if you remember Woodstock, it proves you weren't there. I remember it though, every minute of it, from the first song that Richie Havens played to the last note of Jimi Hendrix. My life would be pretty different now if it wasn't for Woodstock. I like the pun, said Cass. She's the protagonist, calling this village Fields of Concord. Yeah, most people don't get the joke. Handsome Johnny running through the fields of Concord with his musket. Great song by Richie Havens about the evils of war. In fact, it was at that moment that I decided to make it my life's work to found a community where people could live in peace and harmony.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that's where the title came from, and that was Johnny's concept. And my village is kind of a more of a commune, I think. It's kind of a, one of the characters refers to it as a hippie ranch
Yeah.
at one point.
Yeah. That's right.
But
That's
yes, it's similar to what you described. There are starving artists and a village witch and various, the Celtic harper. There are various stereotypes.
and
But
there are
there's also a little,
romances.
there are romances. There's a little enclave of software developers. So there's a lot of individualism, and it gave me, writing this book gave me a chance to explore a lot of those types of personalities that are really interesting to me and
Yeah.
put them all together and see what happens when these techies come in contact with the more hippie side of things.
Right. Right. Would you enjoy living in a place like that?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, this is, of course, my idealized
Yeah.
tiny house village. If I could just create a tiny house village, yes, it would be like the Fields of Concord.
Makes sense. Okay. When you were writing An Older Kind of Justice, did you plot it out?
That's a great question. Great question. I did not. I
Ah,
did not. In the past, I have outlined my books meticulously and they never got written. Never got written. I could not write it that way. I was desperate to outline it and it would not happen. I would get the outline written and then I would just stare at it and weep because I wasn't writing anymore. I was trying to fill in the blanks.
yeah.
So I had a basic idea of where it was going to go. I had no idea how we were going to get there.
Wow. Wow. There's
So
so
it just
many different
shows you,
ways to
yeah, if
write.
you,
Yeah.
yes, you might think that because somebody you respect said, oh, you have to outline,
Right.
that that's the way that, but we all think differently. We all write differently and we're all motivated in different ways.
I
So
have
I think
found
it's
that
more
I
important. Yeah.
absolutely have to let go of any editing of what I'm writing until like the next day at least, or further, because otherwise I will never get by the first paragraph because I will be seeking perfection and writing and rewriting the same thing and going nowhere.
I hear you. Yes, that is a very tempting thing to do. Yeah. So one of the ways that I got around that was, again, I just told myself every morning when I sat down to write, I set a goal of 1,500 words, and I said, I'm not going to be afraid to write something that's real crap. It can be as bad as it possibly could be, and it's okay. It's, you've got to write 1,500 words.
I think you are probably already halfway there. For those of us who are control freaks, um, it's very difficult to give up the image of perfection, and it's very difficult. I've been doing what I call morning pages for years from Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, years ago.
Yes, Julie Cameron.
And,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
what I realized is that that requires three full notebook size pages of writing every morning, and it doesn't
Hmm.
matter what you write. And so what I realized was that 8 years ago when I was doing that, it would take my first two pages were, I don't want to write this. This is stupid. Why am I doing this? I don't have anything. Here's my grocery list. Here's what I need to do today. I hate this. This sucks. And I would go on like that for 2 pages. And all of a sudden on page 3, I think it's my left brain would quit in exhaustion and it would allow my right brain some space
Oh, interesting.
for writing, and it would just come out. It didn't have to be up here plotted out first. It would just come out. And I'm happy to say I just recently restarted the practice of morning pages. And I realized that about halfway down page 1, I'm into it. And that's
There you
wonderful.
go.
Wonderful. Someday I may
Wonderful.
even be able to write fiction.
Well, yes, I wrote morning pages for years and years. I think it's a absolutely wonderful practice.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, there were plenty of days when I sat down to write and had absolutely nothing to say at all. So I would take my character and sit her down at her desk in front of a laptop, and I would write. Cass sat at her laptop and could not figure out what to do. She tried going to the kitchen to get a cup of coffee, blah, 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 blah. And then after going on this way for a while, she heard a knock on the door. So I would have her go open the door, and then the character would walk in, and then finally the scene would begin. So I just sometimes have to just let the characters ramble on
Wow.
and then wait until they're ready to start doing something meaningful.
Wow.
And then all I have to do is walk around behind them and write down what they're doing.
I love your approach. I love it. I love it. I have to tell you that the story itself, while we've labeled it a mystery, and it technically fits that description, there's murder or two, and it fits the description. It also raises some really complex issues, I think. And for me, it's not so much. I've heard or I read an interview with you where you talked about putting characters in places where they have to stretch, where they are out of their element. And I get that part of it. That wasn't the hard part for me. The harder part was a lot of the sort of moral decisions that got made near the end of the book. And I don't want to give anything away, about the book. So it's a little difficult to talk about it. But,
Yes.
decisions were made that are not the norm, that do not fit our usual sense of crime and punishment or acts and reacts. Just didn't. Did you do that on purpose?
That was actually originally what the book was intended to be about. I find it very interesting that we think we know who we are. We think we know what our boundaries are. We think we know what our values are until our life is in danger or the life of a loved one is in danger. And at that point, all bets are off. We do not know who we are until we're in a situation like that, until we have to face something. It's easy to be a really nice person when you're not under any pressure. But if you're under enough pressure, you don't know what you're going to do. And I really wanted to explore exactly that question.
Mm-hmm.
When we're in a situation where we're out of our comfort zone so far that we have absolutely no guideposts anymore, what do you do? What is your reaction going to be? You don't know until you're in that situation. And I wanted to feel what that was like. And the way that I could do that was to get as deeply into the character's head as possible and really feel what would push someone, what it would feel like to be pushed that hard with your back against the wall. What would I do? What would I do in that situation? And that's actually one of the most challenging things about the book for me was that I had to take myself to places that I had never been. And it felt traumatic, actually, to
Really?
be working through those. And the process of writing the story actually brought out a lot of my own trauma from my past. I did not realize that. I thought I was writing a story. I
Yeah.
thought I was making up a story, but we all carry wounding. We all have events in our past, and oftentimes we don't want to deal with them, and we don't. But when I was putting my characters in these situations, they were under a lot of pressure. I began to tap into what was going on in here and what has happened in my own past. And it brought a lot of that out.
It's
So it
very,
was challenging to write that.
I would think so. I mean, usually those kinds of situations of being so far out of the norm come through like tragedy, just crisis, that's the only time we may get
Mm-hmm.
to see who we are in such a situation, how we act, how we respond. Um, I know that, or similarly, when writing um, my memoir, which isn't published yet, but should be next month or the month after. I'm having a lot of trouble with the photographs. Anyway, um, when writing it, I thought that I was just going to be writing a bunch of interesting stories from my life. But I made the mistake, or the good mistake, of writing in first person present, whether I was 4 years old, or 40 or 80. And what happened is all of a sudden, when I was writing as though I were there, everything came back around it.
Mm.
Not necessarily the exact words that were said, but the feelings that were there, the reactions, the interactions with people important in my life got clear for the first time. So the experience, I see now, I can see what was happening is I was recreating them. I mean, I was seeing them often for the first time, bringing my adult brain, into it.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, very interesting.
It was,
And it's interesting you say first person present because I'm actually writing a second volume in the Fields of Concord series, and I'm playing around with first person present.
uh
It's fiction. It's not the same as what you're doing, but it gives an immediacy to the
it does.
emotional side of things.
It really does.
Yeah.
It does. You may suffer through even more in writing this. I've told others that it's the cheapest form of therapy around. you know,
That's not even a joke. That's
I
just
know.
true.
Just
Yes.
right, just right, because it will come out.
Yes.
If you just commit to.
You'll be your own therapist.
That's right.
Yes.
It's
You'll be your own therapist when you're writing. Yes.
it's pretty darn amazing. I have a technical question about your book. What made you decide
Mhm.
to not use quotation marks around speech?
Yeah. Um, I One of my favorite authors is Cormac McCarthy, who never uses them. I also read James Joyce, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. He doesn't use quotes. McCarthy never uses quotes. And I found that to be so compelling. It made me read in a different way, and I loved that. There was less. It didn't feel as disjointed. A quote he said, and then he was thinking this, and then this happened. It seems very disjointed to me, and I wanted it to flow more. And the way to do that was to take out all the quotes. It started out with quotes, just didn't like the way it felt when I read through it.
Mm,
Um, and I got feedback about it. At first, people said they'd have to sort of go back and forth on a paragraph and see,
mhm,
which told me that I hadn't done it correctly. If there was a
mm,
place where somebody has to try to figure out who said what, then that means I haven't written it properly.
mhm, mhm.
But by the end of the book, I felt really comfortable with that, because one of the things it made me do was to give each character a unique voice, so that if somebody was speaking, you knew that is Roz talking because no one else in the book sounds like her, or
Gotcha.
that is Jake talking. He's the only one who would say that. So there was no reason to put quotes around it.
Gotcha.
It took some practice, but I like it so much that my next book isn't going to have quotes either. Fair warning, no quotes in the next one
It
either.
it reminded me just when you were talking, not when I read it. When I read it, I was thinking, "Well, wait a minute. I'm annoyed. She's not using quotes, right?" But one of the things it reminded me of was one of the, not mystery writers, the private detective whole genre, Robert B. Parker. I read all of these Spencer novels. And I read them all
Yes, me
and I
too.
loved them all. Well, then I made the mistake. I mean, he's dead now. He doesn't care, but I made the mistake of listening to him on audio. And it was constantly, go to the bathroom, he said. Da-da-da-da-da, she said. And it started annoying the hell out of me. Now, it didn't annoy me when I was reading it, and that's possibly because when you're so used to something, your eyes skip over it. You just right past it. But hearing it spoken, it was so clumsy. So
Mm.
so that's why I was interested in the why of it. What you thought it added or clarified or what it did for it. And I hear you. It made it smoother. It made it run. It made the characters more real for you, or well, hopefully for the reader.
Yeah, and I'm also a minimalist, and I get distracted visually very easily, which is frankly part of the reason I don't like the visual distraction of quotes. But you said something interesting, which is that when you heard it spoken aloud, it sounded different to you.
Mhm.
And I think that every writer should read their work out loud just to
Mhm.
themselves to see what it sounds like.
Yes, I
You
couldn't
must
agree
you
more.
must do that too. Just to
I
you
do.
hear it, then you're hearing it, and it
Yeah,
sounds different.
I absolutely do. Um, yeah, this writing stuff is so interesting from so many perspectives. Um, for me, I mean, a reason I do this website and the Facebook group called Old Women Who Write um, is more small p political than anything. I think we women, as we age in this culture, have less and less interest or respect from the culture. Just less and less and less and less. We might as well be part of the paint on the wall. Um,
You know,
and if this is an effort really to reclaim who we are, to reclaim sort of a place that we have in this society, and that is a sharing art, sharing wisdom, creating for our own state of mind, as well as I would hope for the benefit of others. We're well past the day when elders were revered, but we can create our own world of that. And to me, give me that any day other than Taco Tuesday. I mean, I am not, I'm just not interested. Taco Tuesday is great, but I am just not interested in spending the years that I have on this earth going to Taco Tuesdays. So I really admire, like, you aren't in the 70s, 80s, and 90s group yet, but you'll get there. But I'm
soon, hopefully.
interested in those who say, okay, I want to do something brand new. I want to do something I've never done before, whether it's climb a mountain or write a book. And you took
Yeah,
the challenge
uh,
on.
I think that what you said is true, that we have less of a voice as we get older, particularly as older women. And I think what everyone of any age, gender, sex wants the most is to be heard, to have a voice, and to be deeply heard and appreciated.
Yes,
And I think that writing is something that allows older women to have that voice and to be heard.
yes,
Because when you're writing, you cannot be interrupted. You have your story and your voice. And I think we all want to be heard, and it behooves us to learn how to write, because that's the way that we can do that. If you're reading a book, you don't see an old woman, an older woman, an old woman who writes. You see the book, you see the story. And the characters in my book, this is interesting, are all half my age. They're young. And
hmm
that was a conscious decision, because I didn't want to push my characters into stereotypes.
yes,
However, having said that, I think that having more age neutral characters would be something I would explore, because we tend to immediately judge people based on their age or their sex or their socioeconomic class. We tend to judge them quickly. And I think not making it clear what age someone is an interesting exercise.
hmm Yeah, I like that
You know,
idea.
look, yeah, sure. Let them talk. Let people see them as a person first before they see them as a 60-year-old woman or a 14-year-old boy. Let us see them as a person
Yes,
first.
yes. I commend to you, by the way, a book that I read recently and I interviewed the writer. Um, it's called Cat Brushing, and I think you would really appreciate it. It is a book of short essays, uh, each one that features, it's fiction, and each
Hmm.
one that features another woman of a certain age, and her sort of take on life, including in the first story, the 90-year-old who falls in love with the nurse at the hospice. You know, it's
Oh, I love that.
brilliant, and the
Oh,
author is in her 80s, and it's her first novel, her first book. I can't call it a novel;
mm,
it's a book of
yeah.
essays, and it's absolutely wonderful. And it speaks to me of how others are out there also claiming and reclaiming, a
Oh,
voice in the world.
yes.
So, yay! Well,
I
Ash,
love that.
this has been fun, and guess what? The half hour has zoomed by.
I
Uh,
can't believe it. All
Zoomed on
right.
Zoom. I also made the joke with you. We're speaking to Ash on Ash Wednesday. Not even Catholic. Maybe you are. I'm not. So I really, really appreciate your being here. I hope we'll get to talk more when I get back. I'm in Florida at the beach condo. I'm not making fun of it. I'm very grateful to be in the warm, I have to tell you. But I'll be back March 1st, and maybe we can get together for a cup of coffee and talk about writing some more. I would enjoy that.
Very good. I love it. It'd be my pleasure. Thank
Right.
you for having me.
And oh, wait, they can buy your book on Amazon?
Yes, yes, the book is available on Amazon, An Older Kind of Justice by Ash Braley, and it's available on Kindle and in paperback.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Thank you again. And to all of you, I hope you've enjoyed this interview, and I hope you'll come back and watch more. Thanks. Bye.